We save hard drinks in here for men who want to get drunk fast, and we don't need any characters around to give the joint atmosphere. Is that clear?
Well, the name of the show is Whiskey Talking. Paul Schultz, Steve Vinson. We're going to do a brief update today. Just going through improvethenews.org that finally got updated. Last time we talked was a Monday. I think maybe they just hadn't, maybe they took Sunday off and just hadn't gotten around to updating.
I mean, it is the Lord's Day.
So this is March 16th. And if you forgot to beware of the Ides of March, sorry, we weren't there to remind you yesterday.
I don't think they're listening anymore. I think they didn't pay attention.
So we'll just get you guys caught up on Ukraine, and that'll be that. No particular theme other than just kind of getting caught up and seeing where we are.
By the way, it's been 21 days.
21 days.
Yep.
That's 3 weeks where I come from. So talks between Russia and Ukraine will resume today, Wednesday, after they ended on Tuesday without much progress. Earlier in the day, leaders from Poland, the Czech Republic, and Slovenia met Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kyiv in a show of unequivocal support. That would surprise me, but it's like, well, that's basically like, we'll come to Kyiv. You know, we'll come there. We know you're being surrounded by the Russian military, and we know we're putting our life in danger by doing that, but we'll.
Yeah.
And the thing is, Poland, I know Poland's a member of NATO. I don't remember if Czech Republic and Slovenia are.
Well, that's what I wonder. I mean, obviously they didn't do it in plain sight where all the world could see, but was it announced that they were going to do that? Because if someone
I mean, they probably just showed up and like.
Oh, okay. Because I wondered if they announced it as a thing, thinking, well, now that we have, you know, now that Poland's in the house.
Czech Republic is
okay
a member, and then and Slovenia. Yeah, Slovenia is as well. So they were all three. So Poland, Czech Republic, Slovenia, all three NATO countries. All three are NATO countries, and that's just wild, man.
So, but my question is, the whole idea of an attack on one is an attack on all, and if Russia knows that they're by extension in Ukraine, does that count as well?
No, I doubt it. Here's one of the things that a lot of the, you know, one of the things that has kind of muddied the waters. There's been a lot of talk about NATO and expanding NATO and what does that mean and all that stuff. And one of the downsides of expanding NATO the way they did over the 90s and 2000s is now it kind of calls into question that it's called Article 5, and it's part of the treaty, and it basically says, in fact, maybe I'll go read it and we could talk about it next time, but it basically is that doctrine of an attack on one NATO country will be considered an attack on all NATO countries and will come to their defense. Now, that having been said, that treaty's only as good as the rest of the country's willingness to actually put their money where their mouth is.
I was gonna say, they're like, did we agree to that?
Yeah.
Is the contract still binding?
Well, and who's going to enforce it? Right? Yeah. It's not like, oh, well, we'll take you to court. Okay.
Yeah.
what sheriff is going to come? You know, so let's say an errant missile finds its way to Slovenia, a country that people didn't even know existed 10 minutes ago, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, blows up a school or something. And Slovenia goes, okay, we're NATO. We are part of NATO, and, you know, we've been attacked. You know, it's, you know, time to send in the U.S. fleet and, you know, armor, and come on, Germany, we're attacking Russia now because Slovenia was attacked, right?
Yeah, right.
I really don't see that happening. Now, if Russia rolls in with armor and like does a full scale, like, here we come, maybe then, you know, NATO countries do something. But So that's where I'm like, now before all this, when it was just, it was France and the Netherlands and Belgium and Italy, and those were the NATO countries, right?
Mhm.
Italy was or not. But anyway, the traditionally thought of as NATO countries. Yeah, absolutely. If the Soviet Union had attacked France, we're all at war, right? That was real clear. Now, by expanding into these countries that were like, what is our national security interest of defending the Czech Republic or Poland or Slovenia? It's like, is that really what is? So really muddied the waters. And now, asking like, well, if their president goes to Ukraine, which is well, that was another piece of it, is you weren't supposed to allow a country into NATO that was in active conflict. So,
that kind of makes sense.
yeah, but they talked about letting Georgia into NATO, which was in active conflict at the time. Its borders were in dispute. They let them in the NATO. I mean, we could do a whole NATO podcast, but
I just have to ask the questions that our
Yeah.
audience is asking.
That's right. That's a good. No, it was an excellent question. It was an excellent question. So the answer, I guess, the short answer is no. That wouldn't count because they chose to go there.
Yeah, that's true.
And so it's more like if somebody's sovereign territory is attacked. And that's one of the reasons I was anxious to talk to Michael too, because you know me, I went and looked at a map. And if you look at map, see, I'm showing a map now. I'm showing Paul the map.
The audience at home can see.
I was a little bit like, okay,
maybe.
So why is Sweden so worried, and why is it such a big deal? We talked to somebody who's floating in the waters off of Norway. So I pulled up a map. Here's Russia. There's Moscow. There's Russia. I'm showing Paul. You guys at home can't see this. This is Russia. This is still Russia. Still Russia up here. Russia, Russia. Border of Norway.
Yeah.
So growing up, I always thought, Sweden, Norway, they're part of Europe. They're not even close to the Soviet Union. And Finland, isn't that part of Scandinavia? Yeah. But they had a war with the Soviet Union. Like, it was always confusing to me growing up. But you pull up a map, Finland's got this long border. Finland's border with Russia is like at least as long as Ukraine's border with Russia.
Right.
Norway has a little bit of border with Russia. And so if you live in Sweden, yes, you're like, we're not even part of NATO. Right. So what if Russia decides, hey, let's roll some armor across Finland?
Yeah.
What are we going to do about it?
Yeah, I did the same thing when I talked to him the other day. The first thing I did was I opened up Google, looked for a map, and went, yeah, I'd be nervous too. And again, that's the fault of the American education system, because when you roll out a map in school, what's dead center in the map?
Yep. The U.S.
Now, maybe is it like that in other countries though? Like if you go to Sweden, is Sweden in the center, and then like that means the poles are in a different place? Or if you go to like France, is France in the middle and everything else is around it, or is it just us?
No, I'd say it's probably everybody, but not in the middle in that sense. Because if the U.S. were truly in the middle, then the poles would be in a different place. What's in the middle is the equator, but what we see is the Western Hemisphere.
Right. So yeah, they all probably do it, but
theirs is probably Europe's probably in the center, left, right. Possibly. No, they probably center the Eurasian continent, I would guess. That's an interesting one. That's more homework we can do.
It just got me thinking, because I'm thinking maybe it's not pounded into their head as much as it is us, in the same way that like people in other countries think it is the most bizarre thing in the world that kids in American schools have the Pledge of Allegiance in the morning.
Oh, right.
They think it is the most bizarre, thing.
Or how about, I asked that question recently because we were at one of Eli's horse riding competitions, and they were playing the national anthem at the beginning of each session. So there's a morning session, an afternoon session, an evening session. So they were playing the national anthem 3 times a day, right? Because you can't possibly have a group of people sit down to watch an event without playing the magic song, because then the magic, if you
The
don't
magic song.
if you don't stand for the magic song, then the magic cloth won't free them.
That's right.
And so it's just bizarre to me. So I asked the question. I was like, is this something that goes on around the world? Like, does every country, like at your kids' sporting events, you're expected to? And it's like, no, that doesn't happen around the world. Maybe they said yes, it does happen, but usually in the very nationalistic, like dictator, like I'll bet in North Korea, I bet it goes on.
Yeah.
So,
which is also part of the reason why they look at us and go, what's going on in the States right now is no big surprise.
Right. So next thing, Ukraine says it repelled a Russian attack on Kyiv Tuesday evening as forces trying to encircle the city reportedly continue to face supply shortages, particularly ammunition. Yeah, and I heard this confirmed too. We've been talking about this since the attack first was clearly not going well for the Russians. We've been talking about this. And I mean, it's super obvious to everybody now. This was supposed to be a 2 or 3 day operation.
Right.
And by the time they were done, they were supposed to be eating in, Ukrainian restaurants and shopping at Ukrainian grocery stores. And they weren't going to need a lot of ammunition. And now they're running out. Wasn't
it like Grenada that basically took like 12 hours to roll through something ridiculous like that? They figured it was going to be a Grenada situation.
Panama, Grenada, like all the places the U.S. used to invade.
The small countries we know we could kick the crap out of.
Well, I remember, I forget if it was Iraq or Afghanistan now, one of the ones that we invaded. I remember they were talking about we were running low on cruise missiles. The U.S. was. And so I started thinking about that with Russia. They've been lobbing all these shells and missiles and stuff. They got to be getting low. And they aren't as well positioned to supply themselves. Maybe that's one of the benefits of the U.S. supplying the whole world with their, a lot of our, our arms suppliers have a lot of customers around the globe. And so we have a lot of factories. USA. If we were ever isolated, if the U.S. were ever isolated for whatever reason, we could just keep cranking out.
Yeah.
We got steel mills, we got resources. The Russians, I don't know how they resupply themselves,
Yeah.
Unless they get it from China.
That's my guess.
Which they have asked for help from China, and the U.S. was like, don't, nope.
Because China's like, we do our biggest customers over there.
Yeah. And the world has shown what they're willing to do.
Yeah.
And that all comes back to one day, maybe we'll do the Ukraine war wrap-up show when this whole thing's over in 15 years. But the early days and winning the information war early on, and what President Zelensky has done to take the initiative in the information war, that to me was everything. Because if they hadn't done that, if we weren't all sitting there rooting for Ukraine because it looked like the scrappy upstart was winning, these sanctions wouldn't have happened, the isolation wouldn't have happened. It would have taken Russia a little bit longer, but they would have won by now, by whatever winning means.
Right.
But anyway, that's a whole other. Meanwhile, at least 2 people were killed and 35 more were injured after a blast hit an apartment building in Kyiv's western town, I can't pronounce, district, Tuesday morning. Sviat Tashin, or a professional, I would have read that ahead of time.
Don't worry, because in about 6 hours, everyone will know how to pronounce it.
Yeah, right. And it'll be pronouncing it 4 different ways. So yeah, it was there's a lot of talk of Russia like intentionally targeting civilians. I'm still not there yet. I'm sure they are. It's possibly they are. I don't know.
I have heard the statistics I've heard, and these are from Ukrainians that are on TikTok explaining stuff, doing live streams and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The statistic I heard is like around 1,300 casualties in the Ukrainian military, about 10 times that for the Russians. But Russians, are killing civilians in these towns.
Yeah.
So whether they're targeting them or not, I don't think they're targeting them. I just don't think they care.
I want to be careful about me saying, how do we know they're targeting civilians? I want to be careful saying that because I don't want to get on the bandwagon of, oh, we got to be careful, just believe in anything and because I don't want to play into the Russian narrative either. That's oh, well, we're just at war here. You can't, both sides, there's fine people on both sides. It's like, no, there are not fine people on both sides. Yes, I feel bad for the Russian people. I feel bad for the conscripts, but to the conscripts, I would say, just surrender. Okay. Go help the other side. It's like, I'm not saying that's easy, and I'm not, I've known people who've been drafted, and it's awful, to be drafted, and it's not easy just to go, okay, I'll go fight for the others. Can you imagine, some kid from Kansas going to Vietnam being like, this war's stupid, we're on the wrong side. I think I'll go join the Viet Cong. You're like, that ain't, it's not easy.
It doesn't work out like that.
It doesn't work out like that. Yeah. But anyway, all that having been said, I am interested in, because you're lying to yourself if you don't think that, again, Ukraine got the initiative on the information war, continues to have the initiative on the information war, and targeting of civilians is one of those things that can make you a pariah in this world.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And so there is no doubt civilians are being killed, and part of it is probably exactly what you're saying is like, we don't care. This is called strategic bombing. We're going to continue. First of all, we don't know exactly where the Ukrainian resistance, the military is. So we're just going to shell the whole place.
Yeah.
But maybe part of it, it's just hard for me to wrap my head around. Is somebody given the order, make sure you kill some civilians,
Yeah, without just relying on speculation and cliche.
Yeah, and even if you're Mr. Spock, right? Even if you go, well, let's just analyze it from a totally logical perspective. It's been disproven that bombing civilians demoralizes them and causes the war to end. Studies have been done. It does the opposite. It strengthens their position. It strengthens their resolve. And they've studied it from World War II perspective, Vietnam perspective. They've just shown that bombing civilian centers, killing civilians, does the opposite of what you would think it would do.
I mean, you and I privately have talked about it and have our own opinions about it, but 9/11.
9/11, right? Well, yes, and that one's sort of a complex one, right?
That's why I'm just brushing on it. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it was. If you really think about it and you look at it, that did sort of happen.
So the terrorism is a different thing. Like, terrorism is inviting an overreaction. So it's an asymmetrical approach where you don't have the resources to attack somebody head on. Right. So what you're trying to do with terrorism usually is invite an overreaction on their part.
Right.
So that you can bring them into a fight where you have more resources and better initiative.
Right.
So by doing 9/11, they weren't trying to demoralize us into leaving them alone, which that was the popular narrative, right? That's what the neocons wanted you to believe. They wanted to say they're trying to scare us. They're trying to demoralize us and say we should withdraw from the Middle East because it's not worth getting bombed, right? The terrorists knew that's not what was going to happen. That's not what they were trying to do. They would have been fine if that had happened, but they knew that what was going to happen is the U.S., first of all, would probably start fighting each other, but then also that they would clamp down on security. People would lose those precious freedoms, right? And that they would send troops over to the Middle East where they could be more easily killed.
Right. Yes. But what I was getting at was just good or bad, whether you believe in it or follow behind it or not, the people kind of galvanized, we'll say.
Yeah, that's what happens. Yeah. So like with the Russians attacking civilians, even even if they're like, well, demoralize them by attacking civilians, they got to know from a logical perspective that that's not going to work, right? Meanwhile, at least two people, let's see, elsewhere, the Parliament of Estonia, a NATO country, made a statement calling for UN member states to establish a no-fly zone over Ukraine. NATO and the US have so far rejected the proposal, given it could draw them into full-blown conflict with the Russian Federation. I mean, we've talked about the no-fly zone issue, and I've been interested in why people call for it. And I believe I know why they're calling. I think they know full well that enforcing a no-fly zone means world war. I think they know that full well.
Yeah. I think it was about 3 episodes ago we talked about it.
I don't think Estonia, I don't think Zelensky, I don't think anybody for 1 second believes you could establish a no-fly zone over Ukraine, and that's just that, right? Russia's going to go, oh, guess we can't fly our planes over Ukraine now. I think that like one of the reasons it's sort of like when you, did I use this analogy? I thought of it. I can't remember if I actually used it. You take your girl to the bar, and she finds the biggest guy in there and starts antagonizing him, like calling him names and like, like, hey, redneck, calling him redneck and all this stuff. And you're like, shh, calm down. Just ease up on that a little bit. She's like, what? He accidentally bumped into me on his way to the bathroom. And you're like, I know, but just let it go. And she's like, he's just a big idiot. What, are you afraid of him? Are you
She's had a few drinks and she ain't
she's had a few drinks. She's all like high and mighty, right? She's trying to get you on a fight, right? It's not like she's like, no, you just establish a no-fly zone. Just make sure he doesn't punch me in the face, and I'll take care of the rest, right? That's not like that. She's trying to get you two into a fight. So if I'm Zelensky, I do exactly what he's doing. I try to get the U.S. and the rest of NATO to fight Russia, because that's that's a gamble. It might save my country, right? It also might start World War III, and people go, like, if you were to say to Zelensky, is it worth World War III over? And he'd go, look at my country. It's being destroyed bit by bit. You think I care?
Right.
My gamble is my country could be wiped off the face of the map over the next 5 years, right? Or if I can draw the rest of you in, maybe nuclear war won't happen, and maybe they'll push Russia back into Russia, So I think that's what they're doing. They're like, in Estonia, again, look at a map. It's right there. Like, there's probably tons of Russian armor sitting on Estonia. Yeah, it's just south of Finland, and it's got a big border with Russia. So that's probably what they're doing. It's like, because they know a no-fly zone would bring, next thing you know, we'd be all out war. So, and part of the reason, like, people ask why is that, and I have to remember, I just should repeat this. It's not just like people, even the New York Times and all of them stop short of what they need to be saying. It's one thing because you go, okay, well, that means NATO jets would have to be willing to shoot down Russian jets. Right? So now NATO is directly engaging Russia. And it's like, okay, yes, but that's not even the worst part. The worst part is there are anti-aircraft systems that will be trying to shoot down NATO jets that are based in Russia and Belarus. So NATO jets and NATO missiles would have to take out those anti-air systems.
Yeah, they're doing two jobs
in Russia. So now we're firing missiles into Russia.
Yeah.
So it'd be like, well, let's have a no-fly. Like if Russia said, we're going to have a no-fly zone over Mexico. We go, well, what's that got to do with us, right? We don't care. Have a no-fly zone over Mexico, right? Our jets are better than yours. We'll fight it out over Mexico. But sitting in Houston, Dallas, Austin, and Phoenix are these anti-aircraft systems that are shooting Russian jets down over Mexico. What do you think Russia's going to do? Next thing you know, they're attacking Houston and,
Maybe equating things like that because a lot of people don't know. Like, I didn't fully understand how the no-fly zone would work at first.
Yeah.
But like everybody else with any kind of sense does a quick crash course,
Yeah.
But by equating or by comparing, well, you say that about that, but what if it was like you were saying? What if it was Texas, which
Yep.
is put it in because Americans love America.
Yeah.
That's all we know. So we just think over there is over there.
Right.
But if you explain, hey, this is what would happen if it was Mexico, it might make them think about it a little. I doubt it, but it might make them think about it a little differently.
Yeah. And you have to think beyond the buzzwords, like no-fly zone. Everybody thinks they know what a no-fly zone is, right?
That's the problem with buzzwords.
Yeah.
And
And
you
they're
just
just like,
say it.
oh, no-fly zone. That sounds like a good idea. Well, what is that? Was there just turn off the ability to fly? Or no, it means actually blowing things up, And if you have a no-fly zone, it's not just planes that are enforcing it, it's anti-aircraft systems as well. Anti-aircraft systems that are sitting in Poland and Czechoslovakia and Estonia. So now they're shooting down Russian planes.
Yeah.
So now Russia is like, you're shooting down our planes. We're gonna, shoot. We're gonna take out your. So now it's like you're days away from a full-blown war between NATO and Russia if you try to do this no-fly zone, right?
You're playing a global game of yard darts at that point.
Right, exactly. And with little kids standing around
looking up.
And we're not talking about jarts either. We're talking about the pointy kind, right?
That's right.
But but if I'm Estonia, if I'm Ukraine, I'm like, sure, I'm going to call for it, and it's a long shot, but why not call for it? So Zelensky's set to deliver a virtual address to members of the U.S. Congress on Wednesday. So that's today. That'll be interesting to see who is in that briefing and what they tweet out during the briefing that puts Zelensky's life in danger. The reason I say that, we didn't talk about this on the show. During he gave a briefing to some members of the U.S. Senate, and during the briefing, like the Ukrainians were like, "Do not send out any pictures or anything during this briefing because the off chance that the Russians are able to figure out where he is by the picture that you tweet out or the video or whatever, you're putting us in danger." And sure enough, a couple of Republican senators were like, "Look, we're talking to Zelensky right now. Here's a picture of him." It's
can't. Okay, does this go back to the don't blame on evil what can be blamed on stupidity, or do you think it was done on purpose? I personally think it was done on purpose, but I wouldn't put it past stupidity.
Yeah, I go back and forth on that. What's her name? I forgot her name already. Green, the weirdo from South Carolina or North Carolina, whatever.
Yeah.
If she were the one that was to do it, I'd say, oh, it's stupidity, because she's like,
That's true. Like if her or Bobblehead did it, it would be stupidity.
Exactly.
But these guys know what the fuck they're doing.
But to get yourself elected senator, I think takes a little more intelligence. So I think it was a combination of ego and probably a little bit of this whole thing would be a lot easier if Zelensky was dead.
Yes.
Probably ego in that you can't tell me what to do. I'm a U.S. senator.
That's right, America.
One of the things I do is I try to. I don't do as much as I don't do it a lot because it's hard, but I try to listen to opposition views.
I know why it's hard to listen to.
And I'm careful which ones I listen to. I'll put it that way. I only listen to the opposition views that I kind of respect. Like, in other words, I'm not going to go listen to Tucker Carlson. I don't give a damn what Tucker Carlson has to say about anything, right?
I only give a damn in the sense that it's dangerous, what he's saying.
Dangerous. I care about it from a knowledge point of view. not from like, in other words, awareness is what I meant to say. Awareness, like you want to be aware of what the enemy's doing. So there's this guy, he actually, the guy that did the podcast, his name's Daryl Cooper. He did the, that Ukrainian, it was called, the anti-humans. It was about what the Soviet Union did to Ukraine.
Oh yeah. Really that guy. Yeah. It's so, really hard to listen to.
I really respect him because, normally the shows that I've listened to, he seems to have a really balanced view on things and just gives like, here's what both sides say and think and whatever. And it's usually historical. So I listened to he published a podcast on Ukraine, his thoughts on Ukraine, but it wasn't pure history. It was, a lot of it was history. And then he gave his thoughts. Like, so he gave you the history of how did we get here, and then gave his thoughts on it. And let me tell you, it is the other side of the story. Like, and it's not that I want to have Jeff listen to it and give his reaction, but I might send it to him and see if he wants to listen to it. But it has a complete different view of how we got here. And so it was hard to listen to. It was really hard to listen to, but that's why I say we might have Jeff on again to just kind of give us because when he was on, it's real clear he's pro-Ukraine, right? And very balanced. He knows it from being on the ground, and he knows who to listen to and who not to listen to, right? But it'd be interesting to get his take on, well, what about the other side of the story? What about those who say, the other stuff?
Right.
And I don't want to say pro-Russian, because this guy didn't come across as pro-Russian at all. In fact, very anti-Russian. Not anti-Russian people, but anti-oligarchy, anti all that stuff.
I think anybody that listens to the show knows what we mean when we say we're anti something. Yeah.
But this guy, I'll just put a link in the show notes. It's Thoughts on Ukraine by Daryl Cooper, Martyr Made podcast. But he places a lot of the blame for where we are today on NATO and the West, and large part Ukraine and Ukrainians who had a corrupt government, just like everybody else. U.S. has a pretty corrupt government, right? And I don't want to say blame. He's 100% of the blame for the invasion is on Putin, and he makes that clear.
Yeah,
he's like, but Putin's not Hitler, right? He's not this ideologue who's like, I need to invade for the sake of invading, right? But anyway, that'll be an interesting one. Maybe we'll do something with that. Would love to have Jeff on and get his take on it. But that having been said, I mean, this was just the whiskey talking.